Ladies and gentlemen, by now many of you have already heard that Jason Van Dyke was beaten in prison. Well, there were a lot of responses to Tiffany Van Dyke's response. And there were a lot of people that took offense to what she said. Now, let's not forget that her husband is in jail for shooting a child 16 times. That was no threat. You watched a video, you saw Laquan McDonald walking away from police officers, not walking towards them. He had no type of things in his hands that were a threat to a cop, especially if you're walking away. I don't care what anybody say. If you are walking away, you are not a threat. Now, her husband committed this violent act of murder on this child, and this woman is sitting around talking about violence on her husband? Well, I tell you what, Tiffany Van Dyke, your husband got to live another day. We can't say that about Laquan McDonald, can we? And I'm now learning that this attack was greatly over exaggerated. So let's get into this story that came out on 105.9 KISS FM. Now, Tiffany Van Dyke is pulling out all the white tears for her husband to be released. He should not be released. He needs a longer prison term. Now, where he is, like I said, is a low to minimum security prison, federal prison. There are people in there that shoplift that got longer sentences than Jason Van Dyke did for killing Laquan McDonald. I want you to think about that. There are people in there that committed thefts, the low to minimum. Those are your petty crimes. But there are people in there with longer sentence than Jason Van Dyke, who got 6 3/4 years for straight up cold-blooded murder. Well, Tiffany, you talked about the jail being violent. Well, jails are violent. They've always been violent. When you go to jail, expect to see violence. Okay, it's a given. Nobody should be shocked over that. Jason Van Dyke is currently in prison for murder of an unarmed teen. Laquan McDonald, the former police officer, is serving an extra light sentence of 81 months. Like I said, there are people that shoplift that get more time behind bars than Jason Van Dyke. There may be people that have committed a string of petty crimes, still in there longer than Jason Van Dyke for a murder. His wife and lawyers are whining to everyone to listen about him serving time, which I'm not going to listen to that, because anybody else in this country that commits a murder, even with one bullet, they get longer time than Jason Van Dyke, because he is a cop, a former police officer. He's got a union behind him. He's got a city, a judge, and everybody behind him to try to make this as easy as possible. This is not the norm. Just understand, none of this, of what you're seeing, is the norm. Tiffany put herself in front of cameras on Thursday and complained that she hasn't spoken to her husband since he was sentenced on January 18th. Jason Van Dyke was reportedly transferred to a prison in Illinois to a federal correctional institution in Danbury, Connecticut, where she claimed he was beaten up. However, the Federal Bureau of Prisons confirmed in an email to the Chicago Tribune that the incident was instead an assault resulting in minor injury. So she went out there over exaggerating this whole thing, ladies and gentlemen, on purpose just to see if she could drum up public sympathy. That's what she was doing. But they said the injuries that he sustained were minor. Minor. So this woman, Tiffany Van Dyke, took it upon herself to go out before cameras and before the media to over exaggerate everything in efforts to try to get her husband out of jail even sooner. That's what this whole thing is about, y'all. But let's go on. Furthermore, inmates in federal custody being transferred all over the country is what happens to many prisoners, regardless of being a cop who killed a teenager. So they said these incidents where inmates are jumped happens all the time, and it happens to damn near any prisoner. It's not because he's a white cop that killed a black child, as his wife conveniently went in front of the media to say. This came right out of her mouth. They put my husband in a setting to be harmed because of the fact that he was, listen to this, a white man who harmed a black gentleman in the line of duty. No, Tiffany. And then she cries at the news conference. No, Tiffany. Your husband showed up on the scene and opened fire on an unarmed teen. That is not doing his job in the line of duty. If it was, his ass would not be sitting in jail. He is a police officer who was convicted of doing this job. No, Tiffany firing and pumping 16 bullets into somebody that was of no harm to your husband was not doing his job. And that's the reason why he's behind bars now. See, this woman is making it very difficult for Jason Van Dyke, y'all. She's not helping. She's making the situation even worse for him. And it is making the public apathetic towards her. So we're supposed to just disregard everything, and just listen to her. Don't talk to me about someone being violent and your husband pumped 16 bullets in a child. He was not even of legal age. He was a child. But you want to talk about violence? Honey, there is nothing more violent than that. She needs to get herself out of the media and go humble herself and sit down. What she is doing is not helping one iota. It's not helping. She is starting to look like a mental patient in front of the cameras. Nobody is going to consider how you feel, Tiffany, and there's a dead child. I don't care how bad Jason was attacked in jail, he still lived another day. Didn't he? ABC reported Judge Vincent Goggin said he considered the most serious charge to be second-degree murder charge, not the 16 aggravated battery charges, and made the sentence decision on the murder. You can best believe this judge that gave him the 6 3/4 years, he's in cahoots with the police department there in Chicago. The horrific video of the killing of McDonald appeared to show Jason Van Dyke fired at him 16 times within 14 seconds. It was overkill. The video was released 1 year after McDonald's death and showed the teen walking away instead of confronting officers, which is what Van Dyke falsely said happened. He said Laquan McDonald confronted him. That's why he felt threatened and shot him 16 times. But when the video came out, it showed the opposite of what he said. Then Van Dyke had the nerve to take the stand and try to tell you what you saw on the video is not what really happened. I mean, just complete idiocy. Two police officers and one detective was acquitted of trying to cover up the shooting. And they did. They did try to cover for Jason Van Dyke. But you got to understand the judges, the prosecutor, the police unions, the cops are all in cahoots with each other. You got to understand if the circumstances were not like that, these cops should have been punished. But, police officers are given the benefit of the doubt in courts that's not given to anyone else. We can even say that Jason Van Dyke's 6.75 year sentence is white privilege. It is. Because anyone else, regular Joe citizen, would have got decades behind bars shooting someone 16 times. Okay, so even though that was precisely what they did, all three men said Van Dyke, who was convicted in October, was justified in shooting the teenager 16 times within 14 seconds. Van Dyke's partner, the night of the shooting, even said McDonald was walking towards Van Dyke. See, they all lied. All of them lied with his arms raised when he was shot. The video would later contradict that account, showing Walsh lied. And why isn't he being dragged through the courts? Still, he and his co-defendants were acquitted, which they never should have been. They never should have been. I wish the prosecutor, the state attorney, would go after the men that were acquitted, as well as Jason Van Dyke. Illinois' general attorney, Kwame Raoul, is reportedly re-examining Van Dyke's light sentence. So I'm sorry, Tiffany, I can't give you 1 ounce of sympathy. There are many wives with children that have husbands behind bars. You sure ain't the only one, and you certainly won't be the last one. Period. But you will get no sympathy from me with your crocodile tears in front of reporters in efforts to get your husband out of jail. I know I can see straight through what this woman is doing. But please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.